The Zephyrian hegemony had ruled the outer spiral for 3,000 years. Their ships were massive crystal structures that looked like floating cities made of diamond and steel. Each vessel stretched for miles and housed millions of warriors, who had never known defeat. Commander Vextel stood in the command center of his flagship, Eternal Dawn, watching the star charts flow across his neural interface. The blue light danced across his crystalline face as he studied the latest reports from the scouting divisions. His tactical officer Zareth approached with news from the outer rim territories. The scanner arrays had detected something unusual. In a remote system centered around a yellow star, primitive radio signals were bouncing around the third planet like excited children calling to each other across a playground. The inhabitants called themselves humans, and they had just started sending small metal ships beyond their homeworld. Vextel examined the data with mild interest. These humans had only recently figured out how to leave their planet. Their largest ships were barely 1,000 meters long, which made them smaller than the maintenance pods that serviced Zephyrian dreadnoughts. By all measurements, they were insects compared to the mighty fleets of the hegemony. The commander made his decision quickly. Standard conquest protocol would apply to this insignificant species. 12 dreadnoughts would be more than enough to claim the system and add another trophy to the hegemony's collection. He activated the fleet communication system and sent orders to his ship captains. Minimal resistance was expected from these primitive creatures. Meanwhile, in the human solar system, Dr. Katie Lawson was having the worst day of her scientific career. She worked on Olympus Base, which orbited the red planet Mars like a metal moon. The deep space monitoring equipment had been acting strange all morning, and now the readings made no sense at all. Massive gravitational distortions were approaching from the outer edges of the solar system. Katie called over to Director Sam Phillips, who was floating near the main computer banks. In the low gravity of the space station, everyone moved like underwater dancers. Phillips pushed off from a wall and drifted over to examine the sensor data that was making Katie so nervous. The numbers were impossible to ignore. 12 enormous objects were heading toward Earth at incredible speeds. Each signature was larger than anything humans had ever built. Katie's hands shook as she ran the calculations again. Hoping she had made an error, Phillips activated the emergency communication channel that connected directly to Earth's military command centers. Within minutes, every defense installation on the planet was buzzing with activity. Red lights flashed in underground bunkers while generals and admirals rushed to emergency meetings. Admiral Jake Morrison commanded the Solar Defense Corps, which had been established just 5 years earlier when humanity first started building serious space defenses. He gathered his senior staff in the main briefing room deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The walls were covered with displays showing ship positions and weapon readiness levels. Morrison looked around the room at his officers. These were the best minds in human space warfare, though they had never faced an actual alien threat. Captain Lisa Morgan was the youngest ship commander in the fleet and had earned her position through brilliant tactical thinking. Lieutenant Commander Paul Scott handled intelligence gathering and had been warning about this possibility for months. The Admiral began the briefing with simple facts. 12 massive objects were approaching Earth from deep space. Each one was the size of a small asteroid and moving with obvious intelligence and purpose. This was clearly first contact with an alien civilization, and it did not appear to be a friendly visit. Captain Morgan leaned forward in her chair. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, but her eyes sparkled with excitement rather than fear. She asked about available human assets, and Morrison gave her the complete inventory. The Solar Defense Corps had 12 orbital defense platforms surrounding Earth like a protective shell. 96 patrol ships were scattered throughout the solar system on routine missions. 3 prototype heavy cruisers represented the most advanced technology humanity had ever built. Lieutenant Commander Scott cleared his throat and offered his analysis. Based on the size difference between human and alien vessels, this appeared to be what the aliens would consider a minor scouting force. The implications were troubling because if 12 ships this large were just scouts, then the main alien fleet must be truly massive. Morrison nodded and made a decision that would change human history. The fleet would treat this encounter as a training exercise against superior opponents. All units would prepare for combat drills using real weapons and live ammunition. If the aliens wanted a fight, then humanity would give them one, but the crews would approach it like any other military exercise. The communication channels came alive as orders flowed out to every human ship and station. Weapon systems that had never been fired in anger began charging their capacitors. Pilots who had trained for years in simulators finally got the chance to test their skills against real targets. The mood throughout the fleet was not fear but anticipation. Dr. Katie Lawson watched the preparations from her research station and felt a chill run down her spine. The alien ships were still days away, but already she could see the human response building like a storm. Every ship was moving into position while ground-based installations turned their weapons toward the stars. Director Phillips floated beside her, studying the tactical displays. He pointed out that the human ships were moving in patterns that would be impossible for most species to survive. The acceleration forces alone should have killed every crew member, but human pilots were different. They had been selected from the best fighter pilots, test pilots, and astronauts on Earth. These were people who thought pulling 8 gravities in a centrifuge was relaxing entertainment. Commander Vextel received regular updates as his fleet approached the human system. His intelligence officers reported that the primitive species had detected their approach and was making preparations. This was unusual because most civilizations either fled in terror or surrendered immediately when faced with Zephyrian military. The human response was neither flight nor surrender. Instead, they were arranging their small ships in what appeared to be attack formations. Vextel found this amusing rather than concerning. Perhaps these humans did not understand the vast difference in capabilities between their tiny vessels and the mighty dreadnoughts of the hegemony. As the alien fleet drew closer to Earth, both sides prepared for what they believed would be a simple encounter. The Zephyrians expected easy conquest while the humans prepared for advanced combat training. Neither side understood that they were about to participate in a battle that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The Zephyrian fleet slowed down as it reached the outer edge of the human solar system. Commander Vextel expected to receive surrender broadcasts from the primitive species, as was standard procedure when advanced civilizations encountered overwhelming force. His communication officers had prepared the usual acceptance speeches that would spare the humans from complete destruction if they submitted immediately. Instead, his communications officer reported something that had never happened before. In 800 years of Zephyrian conquest, the natives were sending a direct transmission to the flagship, and it was not a surrender message. Vextel ordered the message to be displayed on the main screen, expecting to see a terrified primitive leader begging for mercy. What appeared instead was a calm human male wearing a dark blue uniform with metal decorations on his chest. The human's face showed no fear or panic, just professional attention. Admiral Jake Morrison looked directly at the alien commander through the transmission link. His voice was steady and controlled as he identified himself as the leader of the Solar Defense Corps. He informed the aliens that they had entered human territory without permission and requested a statement of their intentions. Vextel's crystalline features shifted in what might have been amusement. This primitive creature was speaking to him as an equal, which was both amusing and slightly insulting. The commander identified himself and his fleet, then delivered the standard conquest announcement. The human system now belonged to the Zephyrian hegemony, and immediate surrender would result in swift rather than prolonged death. Morrison's expression did not change during the alien's threat. He simply stated that the alien demands were not acceptable and gave the Zephyrian fleet 30 minutes to reverse course and leave human space. The human admiral called this their only warning before ending the transmission. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Vextel experienced something approaching genuine surprise. The primitive creature had not only refused to surrender, but had actually threatened a Zephyrian battle fleet. His officers looked at each other in confusion, because this response was completely outside their experience. Sub-Commander Zareth consulted his tactical displays and confirmed that the human vessels were indeed much smaller than Zephyri's ships. The largest human craft measured only 300 meters in length, while the smallest Zephyrian dreadnought was over 10,000 meters long. Perhaps these humans simply did not understand the hopelessness of their situation. Vextal decided to educate the humans about Zephyrian military superiority. He ordered the launch of suppression drones, which were automated weapons designed to destroy orbital installations and defensive positions. The drones would demonstrate overwhelming force while minimizing damage to useful infrastructure. Throughout the human fleet, alarm systems activated as sensor operators detected the approaching alien weapons. Captain Lisa Morgan strapped herself into the command chair of her ship, the UHS Defiant, as her crew moved to battle stations with practiced efficiency. The ship hummed with energy as weapon systems came online and engines prepared for combat maneuvers. Morgan announced to her crew that command headquarters considered this a training drill against superior enemy forces. She told them to show the aliens how humans handled unfavorable odds. The crew responded with enthusiasm rather than fear because they had trained for exactly this scenario. Lieutenant Amy Foster took her position at the weapons console with obvious excitement. She had been waiting months for a chance to test the new torpedo systems under actual combat conditions. The weapons had performed well in simulations, but real battle would prove their effectiveness. Ensign Chris Baker called out contact information from his sensor station. Multiple small craft were launching from the lead alien vessel and moving toward human positions. The enemy objects were large enough to show up clearly on the tactical display, and their flight patterns suggested they were unmanned weapons. Captain Morgan studied the enemy formation and recognized classic probe tactics. The aliens were testing human defenses with expendable units before committing their main forces. She ordered her ship to join Formation Delta 7, which would allow coordinated attacks against the alien drones. The first wave of Zephyrian suppression drones swept toward the human orbital defense platforms like a flock of mechanical birds. Each drone was larger than most human patrol ships and carried plasma weapons capable of destroying entire city blocks. The drones had been designed to overwhelm primitive defenses through sheer firepower and numbers. The alien weapons never reached their intended targets. Human defense platforms unleashed coordinated salvos of kinetic interceptors while patrol ships darted between the massive drones like angry insects. The alien weapons had been designed to fight enemies who used energy shields and beam weapons. But humans relied on different technologies. Sub-Commander Zareth watched his tactical display in growing confusion as drone after drone disappeared from the screen. The human ships were moving at impossible speeds and executing maneuvers that should have killed their crews from acceleration forces. According to Zephyrian understanding of biology, no organic creature could survive such extreme gravitational stress. Commander Vextal demanded to know the maximum acceleration tolerances of human physiology. His science officers had no answer because their sensors indicated the human crews should already be dead from the forces their ships were generating. The small human vessels were pulling maneuvers that would liquefy most known biological forms aboard. The USS Defiant Captain Morgan was enjoying the challenge of fighting against superior numbers. She ordered her navigation officer to execute a rolling dive pattern that would bring them close to a cluster of alien drones. The ship twisted through space like a dancer as Lieutenant Foster prepared to fire a full spread of torpedoes. The human torpedoes had been designed specifically to penetrate advanced alien shielding systems. Each weapon contained a fusion warhead and adaptive targeting computer that could adjust to different defensive technologies. When Foster fired the full spread, the torpedoes streaked toward their targets like bright stars. The enhanced human weapons tore through the Zephyrian drones as if they were made of paper. The alien weapons had shields designed to deflect plasma and particle beams, but they offered no protection against kinetic weapons traveling at significant fractions of light speed. The torpedoes punched through alien armor and exploded inside. The drone hulls. Foster reported direct hits across all targets and confirmed that the alien drones had been completely destroyed. The weapon systems had performed exactly as designed, and the crew was ready for the next wave of enemy attacks. Dr. Katie Lawson monitored the battle from Olympus Base, while recording detailed observations about both human and alien technologies. The sensor readings showed human ships pulling 15 gravity acceleration maneuvers, which should have been impossible for normal crews to survive. Director Phillips explained that the human fleet was crewed entirely by volunteers from Earth's Special Forces units. These were former fighter pilots, astronauts, and test pilots, who had been selected specifically for their ability to handle extreme physical stress. They were the kind of people who considered high-gravity training to be recreational activity. Commander Vextel received reports that challenged everything he thought he knew about space warfare. The entire first wave of suppression drones had been destroyed without causing any damage to human forces. His officers confirmed 0 casualties on the human side, while Zephyrian losses were total. The alien commander ordered the launch of a second wave using full combat drones equipped with their most advanced weapons. These were the same automated fighters that had conquered 17 star systems without suffering significant losses. Surely these superior weapons would demonstrate proper Zephyrian military dominance. Admiral Morrison observed the battle from his command ship and consulted with his tactical officer, Commander Elena Rodriguez. She reported that the aliens were following classic probing strategies by testing human defenses with progressively stronger forces. The human fleet was performing better than expected, and crew morale was actually improving during the engagement. Morrison smiled and ordered all ships to commence Phase 2 of the training exercise. The human fleet would now demonstrate their offensive capabilities against the approaching alien forces. The real test was about to begin. The second wave of Zephyrian combat drones launched from the alien fleet like a swarm of deadly metal insects. These were not the simple suppression units from the first attack, but advanced combat machines that had conquered entire worlds. Each drone carried weapons powerful enough to level mountains and armor that could withstand plasma bombardment for hours. Commander Vextel watched them streak toward the human positions, with confidence that this time the primitive species would learn proper respect. Captain Lisa Morgan saw the approaching enemy formation on her tactical display and felt her pulse quicken with excitement. The new alien drones were twice the size of the previous wave, and their energy signatures indicated much more powerful weapons. This would be a real test of human combat capabilities against superior technology, she called out orders to her squadron of patrol ships as they formed up for a coordinated attack. The HS Defiant took point position while 8 other ships arranged themselves in a formation that would maximize their combined firepower. Morgan had trained for this exact scenario in countless simulations, but now she would find out if human tactics worked against real alien technology. Lieutenant Amy Foster checked her weapons console and reported all systems ready for combat. The armor-piercing rounds were loaded, and the targeting computers had locked onto the largest group of enemy drones. She waited for Morgan's command while watching the tactical display show the aliens getting closer every second. The human ships accelerated toward the alien drones at speeds that should have been impossible for organic crews to survive. Inside each vessel, trained pilots and weapons officers worked calmly despite gravitational forces that would have crushed normal people. These were the elite of human military forces, and they had prepared their entire careers for this moment. Morgan ordered her squadron to execute attack pattern Gamma 7, which involved approaching the enemy formation from multiple angles while maintaining coordinated fire. The human ships moved like dancers through the vacuum of space as they closed the distance to the alien drones. Foster fired the first salvo of armor-piercing rounds when the targets came into optimal range. The depleted uranium slugs left the ship at significant fractions of light speed and crossed the distance to the alien drones in seconds. The Zephyrian combat machines had energy shields, designed to deflect plasma weapons and particle beams, but they offered no protection against solid projectiles moving at such incredible velocities. The human rounds punched through alien armor like hot knives through butter. The Zephyrian drones had conquered 17 star systems, but they had never faced weapons that relied purely on kinetic energy. Their defensive systems simply could not cope with the massive kinetic forces delivered by human ammunition traveling at near relativistic speeds aboard the flagship Eternal Dawn Commander. Vextel watched his tactical display in growing disbelief. The advanced combat drones were being destroyed as quickly as the suppression units from the first wave. His most powerful automated weapons were proving completely ineffective against the small human ships. Sub-Commander Zareth reported that the human projectile weapons appeared to be simple metal slugs without any exotic technology. The primitive kinetic weapons should not have been capable of penetrating advanced Zephyrian armor, but the velocity readings were beyond anything in their experience. Vextel demanded to know how the humans were accelerating solid projectiles to such incredible speeds. His science officers had no explanation because the energy requirements should have been beyond the capabilities of ships so small. The human vessels seemed to possess power generation systems far more advanced than their primitive appearance, suggested. Dr. Katie Lawson monitored the battle from Olympus base while recording detailed measurements of both human and alien weapon systems. She had made a disturbing discovery about the alien fleet configuration that changed her understanding of the entire situation. She called Director Phillips over to examine her analysis of the Zephyrian ship designs. The alien vessels were not configured as warships designed for space combat, but as occupation forces intended for planetary bombardment and ground assault. The aliens had expected no resistance whatsoever from the human forces. Phillips felt his blood run cold as he realized the implications. The Zephyrian fleet had approached Earth expecting to conduct a massacre rather than fight a battle. They were equipped for destroying defenseless targets rather than engaging military opponents who could fight back effectively. Meanwhile, Captain Morgan led her squadron in a series of hit-and-run attacks that confused and frustrated the alien combat drones. The human ships would appear suddenly from an unexpected angle and unleash devastating firepower before disappearing behind asteroids or space debris. The alien weapons could not track targets that moved so unpredictably at such high speeds. The Zephyrian drones had been programmed to fight enemies that used conventional space warfare tactics. They expected opposing forces to form battle lines and exchange long-range fire in orderly formations. The chaotic three-dimensional combat style used by humans was completely outside their tactical programming. Lieutenant Foster reported successful hits on multiple targets, as her weapons console displayed confirmed kills. The alien drones were well armed and heavily armored, but their defensive systems had been designed to counter different types of threats. Human kinetic weapons exploited weaknesses that the aliens had never considered. Admiral Morrison observed the battle from his command ship while consulting with Tactical Officer Commander Elena Rodriguez. She reported that human forces were performing far better than anyone had expected against technologically superior opponents. The alien weapons seemed poorly adapted for fighting ships that relied on high-speed maneuvering and kinetic weapons. Morrison noted that alien tactical responses were slow and predictable, as if they had never faced opponents who fought back effectively. The Zephyrian fleet appeared to be following doctrine designed for overwhelming defenseless targets rather than engaging military forces capable of organized resistance. Commander Vextel watched the destruction of his second drone wave with something approaching panic. The primitive human ships had eliminated his most advanced combat units while sustaining minimal damage to their own forces. His tactical officers could offer no explanation for how such small vessels could be so devastatingly effective. The alien commander made a desperate decision and ordered the launch of his third wave using all remaining combat drones. Every automated weapon on the Zephyrian fleet would attack simultaneously in an overwhelming assault that no primitive species could possibly survive. Surely sheer numbers would compensate for whatever tactical advantages the humans possessed. Captain Morgan received reports from across the human fleet that confirmed the complete destruction of the second alien drone wave. Her weapons officer reported all systems functioning normally and ready for continued combat operations. The crew showed no signs of fatigue despite the intense maneuvering they had endured during the Engagement. The tactical display showed a massive new wave of alien drones launching from the enemy fleet. This attack included nearly 3 times as many units as the previous waves combined. Morgan smiled as she realized the aliens were finally committing their full strength to the battle. She opened a communication channel to Admiral Morrison and requested permission to engage the main alien fleet directly. Her squadron had proven that human weapons could destroy alien drones, but she wanted to test their effectiveness against the primary enemy vessels themselves. Morrison granted permission for the attack and authorized all human forces to begin offensive operations against the Zephyrian fleet. The training exercise was about to enter its final phase as human ships prepared to assault targets that outweighed them by thousands to one. Dr. Lawson watched the preparations from her monitoring station and realized that the aliens had made a fatal miscalculation. They had expected to find a defenseless, primitive species, but instead encountered military forces that had been preparing for this exact scenario for years. The humans were not just defending themselves, but actively hunting the alien invaders. The battle was about to escalate from defensive action to full-scale assault as human forces demonstrated why they considered this entire engagement to be nothing more than advanced combat training. The third wave of Zephyrian combat drones filled the space between the alien fleet and human positions like a cloud of deadly metal hornets. Commander Vextal had committed every automated weapon at his disposal in a desperate attempt to overwhelm the surprisingly effective human defenses. 300 advanced combat drones streaked toward Earth carrying enough firepower to reduce continents to molten slag. The human response was immediate and devastating. 96 patrol ships accelerated toward the incoming drone swarm, while 12 orbital defense platforms provided covering fire from their fixed positions. The 3 prototype heavy cruisers moved into flanking positions to catch any drones that broke through the initial defensive screen. Captain Lisa Morgan led the first squadron directly into the heart of the alien formation. Her ship, the UHS Defiant, carved through enemy lines like a blade, while the rest of her unit followed in perfect coordination. The human pilots executed maneuvers that violated every known principle of safe spaceflight as they twisted and rolled through 3-dimensional space at impossible speeds. Lieutenant Amy Foster unleashed continuous streams of armor-piercing rounds from her weapons console. The depleted uranium slugs tore through alien drone hulls with unstoppable force, while the targeting computers automatically adjusted for the chaotic movement of both human and enemy ships. She called out confirmed kills as drone after drone exploded under the relentless human assault. The Zephyrian drones found themselves completely outmatched by opponents who fought in ways their programming could not predict or counter. The alien weapons had been designed to engage enemies who used conventional tactics and fought from predictable formations. Humans ignored every rule of civilized warfare and attacked from all directions. Simultaneously, Commander Vextal watched his entire drone force disappear from the tactical display in less than 20 minutes. 300 of his most advanced combat units had been destroyed by fewer than 100 primitive human ships. His crystalline features flickered with emotions that his species rarely experienced as the magnitude of the defeat became clear. Commander Zareth reported that human casualties remained at 0, while Zephyrian losses were approaching total annihilation. The small human ships seemed immune to alien weapons, while their own projectile systems proved devastatingly effective against Zephyrian technology. The tactical situation had become completely hopeless for the invasion force. Katie Lawson monitored the battle from Olympus Base while making rapid calculations about human combat effectiveness. The acceleration readings from the human ships continued to show impossible performance levels as crews endured gravitational forces that should have been instantly fatal to organic life forms. Director Phillips explained that every ship in the human fleet was crewed by volunteers from the most elite military units on Earth. These were test pilots who regularly survived experimental aircraft crashes, astronauts who had trained in high-gravity centrifuges for years, and special forces operators who considered extreme physical stress to be normal working conditions. The human crews were not superhuman, but they represented the absolute peak of human physical and mental conditioning. They had been selected specifically for their ability to function under conditions that would incapacitate normal people. The alien invaders had encountered the best that humanity could offer and found them far more formidable than expected. Admiral Morrison observed the complete destruction of the alien drone forces and made a decision that would echo through galactic history. He ordered all human ships to begin direct assault operations against the main Zephyrian fleet. The training exercise was entering its final phase as human forces, prepared to engage targets thousands of times larger than their own vessels. Captain Morgan received the attack authorization and felt her pulse quicken with anticipation. Her squadron had proven that human weapons could destroy alien drones, but now they would test their effectiveness against the massive enemy capital ships. She opened a communication channel to her crew and announced that they were about to engage the primary targets. The UHS Defiant accelerated toward the alien flagship Eternal Dawn, along with 8 other patrol ships in a coordinated assault formation. The human vessels approached the enormous Zephyrian dreadnought, like wolves attacking a giant while maintaining perfect tactical coordination despite the insane speeds involved. Commander Vextel watched the approaching human ships with growing horror. The tiny vessels were accelerating directly toward his flagship in what appeared to be a suicide attack. Surely no sane commander would order such a desperate assault against overwhelming odds. The human ships reached the Eternal Dawn and executed a maneuver that would have been impossible for any other species in the galaxy. They used the massive alien vessel's own artificial gravity field as a slingshot to whip around it at incredible velocity while firing continuously. The patrol ships orbited the dreadnought like electrons around an atomic nucleus while unleashing devastating streams of kinetic projectiles. Lieutenant Foster maintained continuous fire as her ship spun around the alien vessel in a pattern that would have liquefied any normal crew. The armor-piercing rounds struck the Zephyrian hull at velocities approaching the speed of light and punched through armor plating that had withstood plasma bombardment for millennia. The Eternal Dawn's defensive systems had been designed to deflect energy weapons and particle beams but offered no protection against solid projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. Armor that could resist the heat of stellar coronas buckled and shattered under the kinetic assault from human weapons. Sub-Commander Zareth reported critical damage to primary systems as the human attack continued. Hull breaches were appearing throughout the ship while internal explosions damaged essential equipment. The mighty flagship of the Zephyrian fleet was being systematically destroyed by ships smaller than its maintenance pods. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human squadrons engaged the remaining alien dreadnoughts. The massive Zephyrian vessels had been built to intimidate primitive species through sheer size, but their bulk made them easy targets for fast-moving human ships that could attack from any angle. Captain Morgan led her squadron in another high-speed pass around the alien flagship while calling out targeting priorities to her weapons officer. The human ships moved in perfect formation despite pulling maneuvers that generated forces exceeding 20 gravities. Her crew worked with calm efficiency as they systematically dismantled the most powerful warship in the Zephyrian fleet. Commander Vextel realized that his invasion force was facing complete annihilation at the hands of opponents he had dismissed as primitive insects. 7 of his 12 dreadnoughts had already suffered critical damage while the remaining vessels reported similar attacks by other human squadrons. The alien commander found himself in a situation that no Zephyrian officer had faced in 3,000 years of conquest. His technologically superior fleet was being defeated by opponents who should have posed no threat whatsoever. The humans fought with tactics and weapons that made conventional defensive systems useless. Admiral Morrison received reports from across the human fleet confirming successful engagement with all primary alien targets. The massive enemy ships were taking heavy damage while human casualties remained minimal. The training exercise was proceeding exactly as planned, with human forces demonstrating their capabilities against larger opponents. Dr. Lawson watched the tactical display from her monitoring station and realized that the alien fleet was doomed. The Zephyrian ships had been designed for bombardment and occupation rather than ship-to-ship combat. They were powerful but slow, while human vessels combined devastating firepower. With incredible mobility, the battle was approaching its conclusion, as human forces prepared to deliver the final blow against an enemy that had underestimated them completely. The aliens had triggered what they thought would be a simple conquest, but discovered instead that humans considered their entire invasion fleet to be nothing more than training targets. The Zephyrian fleet was dying. 7 of the 12 massive dreadnoughts had suffered critical damage, while the remaining 5 ships reported catastrophic system failures throughout their hulls. Commander Vextal stood in the command center of his flagship, watching damage reports flood across his neural interface like a river of despair. The humans had not just attacked but swarmed his forces with tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Instead of forming orderly battle lines and exchanging long-range fire the primitive species had closed to, knife-fighting distance and engaged in three-dimensional combat that made Zephyrian targeting systems completely useless. Captain Lisa Morgan led her squadron in one final assault run against the alien flagship. The Defiant streaked toward the massive vessel along with her 8 escort ships in perfect formation despite the incredible gravitational forces involved. The human crews worked with calm efficiency as they prepared to deliver the killing blow to their enormous opponent. Lieutenant Amy Foster maintained continuous fire from her weapons console as the ship completed another impossible maneuver around. The Eternal Dawn, their armor-piercing rounds punched through alien hull plating like hot knives through butter, while internal explosions lit up the massive vessel from within. She reported structural collapse in multiple sections of the enemy ship. Commander Vextal received the final damage assessment from his engineering teams. The flagship had lost primary power main weapons and life support throughout most of its structure. Massive hull breaches were venting atmosphere while fires raged through compartments that had never known defeat. His mighty vessel was reduced to a drifting wreck in the space of 4 hours. Sub-Commander Zareth delivered the casualty report that confirmed the complete destruction of the Zephyrian invasion force. 7 ships destroyed, 5 ships critically damaged, and 0 confirmed kills of human vessels. The most one-sided defeat in 3,000 years of Zephyrian military history had been inflicted by opponents they had dismissed as primitive insects. Admiral Morrison observed the aftermath of the battle from his command ship while reviewing the performance reports from across the human fleet. Commander Elena Rodriguez confirmed that all primary objectives had been achieved with minimal damage to human forces. 2 patrol ships had suffered minor hull damage, but remained fully operational. The Admiral opened a communication channel to the alien flagship and prepared to deliver terms for the surrender of the surviving Zephyrian forces. He expected to negotiate with a defeated enemy commander who would accept any conditions rather than face complete annihilation. Morrison's image appeared on the main screen of the Eternal Dawn, showing a calm professional officer who showed no signs of excitement or triumph. Commander Vextal stared at the human Admiral with something approaching religious awe as he tried to comprehend what had just happened to his supposedly invincible fleet. Morrison began the conversation by acknowledging that the alien fleet was disabled and their invasion had failed. He offered Vextal one opportunity to withdraw from human space with whatever ships remained capable of travel. The tone was businesslike rather than threatening, as if discussing routine military procedures. Vextal found his voice with considerable difficulty. The crystalline structures of his face pulsed with confusion as he asked the question that had been tormenting him throughout the battle. What exactly were these humans that could destroy a Zephyrian battle fleet with such apparent ease? Morrison smiled with genuine amusement before delivering the answer that would reshape galactic politics forever. He explained that humans were simply humans, and that the alien fleet had helped them complete a very effective training exercise. The human pilots had needed practice against superior numbers and larger ships, so they appreciated the opportunity to test their skills. The alien commander felt his understanding of reality crumble as Morrison continued his explanation. This Entire engagement had been nothing more than a training exercise for the human military. Their ships had not been fighting for survival, but practicing combat techniques against live targets. Vextal asked the question that he dreaded to hear answered. If this had been a training exercise, then what would have happened if the humans had considered it an actual war requiring their full military response? Morrison's smile widened as he explained that real wars would involve their actual warships rather than the patrol vessels and training platforms that had engaged the Zephyrian fleet. The ships that had destroyed 12 dreadnoughts were not even considered proper military vessels by human standards. The transmission ended, leaving Vextal staring at a blank screen while trying to process the implications of what he had learned. His invasion fleet had been effortlessly defeated by what humans considered practice targets operated by trainee crews using obsolete equipment. Dr. Katie Lawson monitored the alien fleet withdrawal from Olympus Base while recording final observations about the encounter. The surviving Zephyrian ships were limping away from human space at maximum possible speed despite their damaged condition. She turned to Director Phillips with a question about the long-term consequences. Phillips calculated that alien communications would take approximately 6 months to reach Zephyrian territory at their transmission speeds. This would give humanity time to prepare for the inevitable return visit when the aliens came back with reinforcements and a better understanding of human capabilities. Lawson asked if he expected the Zephyrians to attempt another invasion with a larger fleet. Phillips smiled grimly as he explained that the aliens would probably assume human military capabilities were far beyond what they had actually witnessed. The psychological impact of treating their invasion as training would multiply their fear exponentially. Captain Morgan secured her ship for the return journey to Earth while addressing her crew over the internal communication system. She congratulated them on excellent performance during the day's training exercises and noted that all systems had functioned within acceptable parameters during the engagement. Lieutenant Foster grinned at her weapons console as she powered down the combat systems. She asked if there was any word about when they would get to test their equipment against more challenging opponents. The alien fleet had provided good target practice, but she hoped for more demanding exercises in the future. Morgan checked her tactical displays one final time before responding. She told Foster that something indicated they would not have to wait very long for more interesting challenges. The human fleet was already preparing for the next phase of training operations. 6 months later, the Zephyrian distress signal reached their homeworlds, carrying a message that would change the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The transmission warned against any contact with the human species and recommended immediate strategic withdrawal from all territories adjacent to their space. The message explained that human military capabilities exceeded current Zephyrian understanding by orders of magnitude. What they had assumed was the entire human fleet had turned out to be nothing more than a training exercise using practice equipment. The implications were too terrifying for the hegemony leadership to ignore. Meanwhile, the humans continued their routine military exercises, while occasionally wondering when someone would provide them with opponents worthy of their full attention. The Solar Defense Corps had tripled in size as recruitment applications flooded in from across human space. Everyone wanted to join the force that had made an alien invasion fleet flee in terror. Admiral Morrison reviewed deployment schedules from his office while planning the next phase of human expansion into deep space. The encounter with the Zephyrians had proven that humanity was ready to take its place among the galactic powers. The question was no longer whether humans could defend themselves, but how far their influence would eventually reach. Commander Elena Rodriguez entered with intelligence reports from 17 different alien species requesting non-aggression treaties with humanity. The news of the Zephyrian defeat had spread quickly through interstellar communication networks. Every civilization in the region wanted to avoid the fate of the hegemony. Invasion fleet. Morrison smiled as he approved the new training schedules for the expanded human fleet. The universe was full of potential opponents and humanity needed to stay in practice. After all, they would not want to get rusty before the real wars began.